And you're welcome back. Today, well, we seem to have one big story after another. Now, our next big story for Breakfast Extra. In recent developments, the Federal High Court in Kano has adjourned a 1 billion naira lawsuit filed against the Niger Police Force and the Department of State Services over the arrest and detention of 6 activists during last year's End Bad Governance protest. The case was brought before the court on March 6, 2025. Proceedings were delayed after the respondents requested additional time to file their defense, leading to the adjournment of the matter to March 26, 2025. Now, during a recent press conference in Abuja, members of the End Bad Governance protest movements called on the Department of State Services to drop all charges against one of their members, Khalid Aminu. They accused the DSS of persecuting Aminu, alleging that he is being victimized for speaking out about his detention experience following the 2024 protests. The group condemned the DSS's actions, asserting that the service is in breach of constitutional procedures and attempting to deny Aminu his fundamental right to free speech.
To provide further insight into these developments, we're joined by Hassan Soweto, the spokesperson for the Youth Rights Campaign. Mr. Soweto has been actively involved in advocating for the rights of protesters and has closely followed the legal proceedings surrounding the End Bad Governance demonstrations. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Welcome back, Soweto.
Always my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The protracted nature of the legal proceedings people are arguing is raising questions about an attempt to suppress dissent and about judicial impartiality. What's your thinking on it?
Well, I think you already made the key point, and it is that all of what we're experiencing regarding the persecution of activists since the End Bad Governance protest last year, but also in particular the trial of 11 End Bad Governance activists for treason is an attempt to suppress dissent, to criminalize protest. And I must tell you this morning that very, very sadly, we think that the Nigerian judiciary has become an accomplice to the decision and the agenda of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration to continue to prevent Nigerians from being able to exercise their freedom of expression and assembly. Why I say this is because of some of the cases we have just mentioned. Regarding Khalid Aminu, what we see is an attempt by a state security that arrested someone, detained him for over 60 days, in the process torturing him, which is a violation of his fundamental human rights, a violation of all of the statutes and international conventions that Nigeria is signatory to. And when he came out, he then voiced out about his treatment. And then the same DSS is now using the court to harass him, suing him for defamation. We think that the judiciary there's a need for a review of what is happening, because when you move away from Khalid Aminu and you go to what is happening with the Abuja 11, whose case came up just 2 days ago, you also see the same situation of the judiciary actually not serving as the last hope of the common man, as it's always said. The 11 End Bad Governance protesters who are starting trial are right now in a state of depression. Do you know why? Because since they got their bail on September 11, the trial judge, Justice Emeka Nwite, has more or less just absconded. Every trial date that is set by himself since September 11, Justice Emeka Nwite has made it a part of duty to be absent. The same thing happened on March 26 this week. And what that means to these young people, 11 of them, is that for over 7 months after their ordeal in prison and police detention, those false charges of treason, which by the way carries a death penalty, continues to hang on their heads. It means that their life is practically on hold. They can't seek employment. Those of them who want to seek admission, they can't do that. If they want to pursue any transport of the country, they can't do that.
So does this give strength to the position that this is a chilling message from the government using the judiciary that protest at your own risk to discourage others from participating in the process? Because when you think about it, there were some that were pardoned for this same protest.
Exactly. I mean, about 119 protesters were pardoned last year. And the charges against them are the same charges against these 11. But what we are even saying is that the trial judge has not even allowed these people to have their day in court. The trial has not even started 7 months after. And all of their bank accounts, a lien have been placed on it since August. I know one of them who is a businesswoman in Jollof, whose businesses are ruined today because she's owing client money locked up in about 6 bank accounts, you know, that the police have the CBN rather have put a lien on. Their phones, their laptops have been held by the police since August. One of them is a graphic artist. So he's been out of a job over the past 6 months.
Now, Soweto.
So the idea, what I'm saying therefore, and I'm sorry to interject, is that we have a situation whereby the Nigerian judiciary appears to be acting in complicity with the executive, and I would like a situation where I can be proved wrong, and that is why it's important for the Chief Justice of the Federation to intervene in this. We can't have a situation where for over 7 months, people are in court, and a judge does not appear in court at every of the adjourned date over the past 7 months.
Has the NBA reacted?
I'm so sorry, Felicity. I wanted to jump on something that you had just mentioned regarding this being used as a tool for anybody who's dissenting regarding the government. In the past couple of years, we've seen the youth actually come out and en masse as a collective to voice out their dissatisfaction with the government. Do you think that we're still going to see this kind of movement? There was the End Bad Governance movement from last year, and from before that it was End SARS. Do you think that we are going to see this kind of, well, you were in charge of most of these movements. Is it going to still be the same momentum that we saw in these previous movements?
Definitely, it's going to be.
And what tools would you use, especially now regarding what legal tools could be used outside or isolating these matters that we currently have right now?
You know, one thing is this. Dictators always think that vicious oppression prevents protest and resistance from happening. But what they don't know is that the more vicious suppression is, the more it emboldens people. Because what people are faced with is actually more serious, the economic crisis, which means, therefore, that people are permanently driven to have to fight, regardless of what you are doing. So that none of this would prevent a movement from still coming back to the street. We see the 30 days run challenge going on. And I have to say that for all of the young people who are organized around that, we now have to take the movement to the street.
So I like that you actually mentioned that, because that's where I'm going. If people can't come out en masse or fear risking these kinds of treatment that the government is messing out to these protesters that still have their cases in court and they haven't seen a day in court, like you said, what about tools like social media? Are we seeing that?
But social media organizing and campaigning is also being dealt with the same ruthless manner. Bloggers are in prison. You know, many people are in court today or in prison today simply because they tweeted, not because they actually carried the placards. So all of the means of engagement is being suppressed by the regime, and that is why when the next movement breaks out, it's going to be a different thing entirely.
What would it be? I'm curious.
Yes, well, let's wait and see. But what is very clear right now is that the government has made it very clear that the legislature is not for the people. It's like, you know,
there is a body,
in a way.
MBA. Has there been any interaction between your movement and the MBA to try and, because justice delayed is still justice denied. There's been unnecessary elongation of the process.
We're in touch with the MBA. I mean, don't forget, and I must say this very publicly, that we commend the MBA for what they have done. Don't forget that. It was the NBA consistent intervention that led to the release of some of those protesters arrested, last year, you know, in Kano, in different other places. NBA has really tried. We are in touch with them. I will continue to be in touch with them even over this. But the NBA itself can only just, pressure the government. The reality is that we have a government that does not listen. This is a game, this is an agenda. The agenda is to keep these false charges around their neck, to use that, to prevent them from being able to organize, resistance. It's also to make them an example, for others, so that people will be afraid, looking at those 11 and say, oh, I do not want to get into this kind of mess. But the reality, again, like I was trying to say, is that what is driving people right now, the pain of the economy, of the hunger, of the hardship, of the increment in prices of goods and services, is so serious, so severe, that resistance would have to continue. And that is why all of us, Nigerian people, the workers, the youths, we have to begin, to organize ourselves to go back to the street. And I hope that this time around, the trade union movement, can also be able, to come into the struggle. Because part of the reason why the government is able to go on like a rampaging dictatorship right now is because they feel emboldened, because the traditional mass organizations of the people that are very strong and very effective, like the trade unions and the student movement.
So why do you think that the NLC, the Trade Union Congress, and other labor unions have not come out to speak on this matter, considering the period of time that it has stretched for? Or is it perhaps, like you said, the game that the federal government is playing with, using a few, the majority has been pardoned, but just using this few to send that chilling message? Or is there something you can do to get the other unions to come into the matter?
I mean, all we can do is to continue to appeal to them. I mean, we have different means of reaching out to groups and unions, and we have always been doing that. Even in August, we did that. We reached out to the trade unions.
And what has been their response?
But what we are faced with the trade unions is that there's a crisis of leadership and ideology within the trade union movement. You have a situation within the trade union movement where the leadership thinks that, when it comes to the anti-poor neoliberal policies that is being implemented by the regime, what you need to just do is to negotiate for some concession, for some respite, not to fight, to reject the whole thing. And I think that that policy is beginning, to manifest as a failure for the trade union leadership today. Workers are some of the most, have had their conditions really go bad over the past 2 years. The minimum wage that was won, in the last 1 year, it has been completely incapable of resolving the economic crisis facing the working people. Okay. That minimum wage is just $47. Meanwhile, in 1981, the minimum wage of 125 naira was worth over $250. Okay. So what that means is that the purchasing power of the workers are down. And what we are saying right now is that the trade union should abandon this class collaborationist approach of thinking that we could just negotiate. So now we need a general strike backed by mass protest. That is what we need now to push the government to begin to address all of the demands of the people.
So noted. And in these kinds of situations where there is a movement of dissent against the government, asking for rights of the people, we always find that there is always an opposition movement. And very more often than not, if it's the youth that are driving one movement here, it's also the youth that are also opposing. How can you, or what could you tell people that they could use to identify, or what are the characteristics of these movements if they are, well, not wholesome? What would you say to people to look out for when they see these movements rise up against maybe wholesome movements like what you're trying to push?
Well, I mean, for me, I think that it's always the case that when, people are trying to organize to fight for change, that there will be opposition, even from among the mass of the people. It's always the case, really. In August, we had that. But what I think we have to concentrate on, is the fact that the policies that we are up against affect a majority of the population, so that those who might be organizing in favor of the government, are always in a minority. And from that point of view, whatever they do, it can't really change the course of event. What people need to do is to concentrate on what, on the messages and on the organizing we have to do. If, for instance, now, we decide in this country that at the end of the 30 days run challenge, we are moving to the street, obviously government may try to get their own people to also come to the street and say that, they are doing a counter-protest. But the reality is that at the end of the day, the proportion of those who will come out in favor of a protest to make life better for all would always be greater. And those other ones are paid so that they cannot last for long. So I don't even want to dwell so much on it. I think that right now, we have the momentum on our side, because if you look at the policies of the government, they are not getting better. They are actually getting worse. And from that point of view, it creates an urgency in the situation. It means by next month, we'll be marking 2 years of the administration, which for the rest of us is 2 years of complete erosion of our living conditions, of our income, and of our lives. So from that point of view, we need to be thinking of how...
What do we see these movements move into being a collective, maybe even a party? If the youth have a collective where they can actually rise up against the government and say, this is what we want, how about coming together and forming a party that could... I know you're going to bring up the issue of financing a political party or even candidates, but isn't it about time that the youths actually stand and say, this is our party, this is what we want, and we can go up against the juggernauts that we see in positions today? Yes,
that's a very fine point. And that's actually some of the things that we've been discussing in the movement. Interestingly, that debate is not started for a very long period of time. The need for political representation that stands for the interest of the youth, of the working class, and of the poor. Because oftentimes, the political parties that we see there actually are for the rich, so, which is exactly why, even when the youth,
so what challenges need to be surmounted to get there?
The first thing is for us to have a framework of ideas and vision of what we want to do, which is accepted by as many people as possible, and then to begin to work towards building the organization, the party, that represent that. And then, of course, the whole process of applying and all of that. But the vision first is what we need to have.
So, but do you have a strategy? Would you have a strategy for managing infighting and self-interest, sabotaging the collective will? Because what we have seen, we saw what happened during the 2023 elections. We had the youths come together, they seem to band together, and then before you know it, there is an implosion from inside, because sometimes they say there are saboteurs that come in to try and impede the process. How can you, because if the unit is not whole, how would you hope to fight the bigger battle? So is that part of a strategy to ensure that infighting does not implode whatever setup before you come out?
See, I think that sometimes we might be jumping ahead of things. The very first thing is to build something. The question of infighting and all of that, they are inevitable in any place where you have more than 2 or 3 people. What is important is that what are those fightings about? If the debates and the disagreements are about how best, to build our party, how best to win elections, how best to fight for change, they are not negative.
Yeah, I mean, you're being, when you say that, you're being simplistic in explaining the fact that, I'm not talking about infight. We know healthy debate is necessary, healthy fight is necessary. I'm talking about the divisive one where you now have, camps inside. We have this,
like we see in the regular parties today.
Yes,
it could
in
also
the regular party. PDP, for instance, is almost going under because of the infighting.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I said, because the very first thing is to have the party first. That's the tall order that we are faced with now. We haven't even done that. And I thought that talking about things that might affect the party going forward.
No, but it's always good to prepare. I guess that's...
No, we should prepare, obviously.
Okay.
But don't also forget that earlier on, when I responded to the question of the party, I said the very first is to get the vision and acceptance of the vision.
Okay, let's go back to the... Okay, go ahead.
Because when you look at the other parties you are talking about, which are parties of the rich, these are parties that, from the point of view of the ideology and manifesto, self-interest, avarice, and all of that are embedded. So it's inevitable that you have that kind of situation developing. These are
right.
parties that are electoral machineries to get people
I'm
to
told
power.
we have less than 2 minutes, and I would like you to speak to this. What these protesters are asking for, they are seeking legal declarations affirming their arrest was unlawful, arguing that it violated their fundamental human rights, the peaceful assembly, and they also talked about they are seeking recognition of the alleged rights violation. They are demanding a joint compensation of 1 billion naira from the government. Is there a possibility that the merit of their case is what is hampering the process, or do you still expect a fair hearing at the end of the day after all of this delay, considering the suspicions that the judiciary is being weaponized?
Well, that case you mentioned is regarding is in Kano State, comrades in Kano State,
yes.
Who are suing the police for the illegal arrest and detention they suffered ahead of the October 1st protest last year. They are suing the police for 1 billion. We are also suing the police in Lagos, for something similar. Well, you can't, given the state of the judiciary today, you can't be too hopeful that you get justice. But what we have decided to do is not to leave any of these violations unchallenged. The process of challenging them, also helps, to ensure that, we demand accountability. Whatever will then come out of that, we will see. But what I think must also be said, which I'm trying to emphasize, is that we are not going to leave our destinies in the hands of the judiciary. The judiciary can stand up and do what it needs to do to ensure that this country does not go bust. But for the Nigerian people, we have decided to, take our destiny to our own hands, which is why we need to get the movement back to the street again. That is where we need to have a fight. And we must have a vision of a new and a better Nigeria. I want to stress that again, because that is what will then lead to form a political party, that represent that vision. The vision of a Nigeria we are talking about is one where the resources and wealth of this country is in the hands of the people.
Well, I do hope that classist, I think that was something you said earlier, negotiations don't impede the process of us, really building. The work is cut out, I guess, for a formation that will be formidable enough, because we're also hearing talks of coalition from the old breeds.
Exactly, and there is that. So if the old people can come together, then the youth should actually see that there's something that they need to put in place now.
Definitely. Definitely.
So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming through
Pleasure.
once again. We hope to see these matters to their end, and hopefully these people who are still waiting for their trial can get a sigh of relief eventually. Thank you very much.
Thank you.